Hi, this is Dan Henk. This is another edition of the Skill Sessions. And today my guest is Robert Ford. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, Robert. So let's talk a little bit about you. What do you have going on?
I've been writing horror full time for quite a while now. I've written 17 books so far, and the newest book that I have out is called The Dead Pennies. That's out from Cemetery Dance Publications.
Okay.
So that came out in September, and it's just kind of making the rounds. It's a supernatural horror thriller. It's the first time that I've written something that has creeped me out. Because it takes a lot to do that, these days. Because the more horror you read, it's easy to get jaded. It's easy to just
Right.
go, "Okay, this is going to happen." But doing the research for
Like
this,
after a while, that jump scare didn't work anymore.
exactly. I mean, jump scares are fun, sure, but I mean, they don't linger with you.
Right.
And doing the research for the Dead Pennies, I dug into it's loosely based upon a state school in New York called Willowbrook, and it was a hospital for mentally challenged children. It started as it was supposed to be built for 4,000 residents. It very rapidly grew to 6,000, and there was just no way for the staff to properly care, for the residents there. And it got to the point where there were national reports. I think Geraldo Rivera did a report. A couple other
What year
people.
was this when all this is going down?
I believe this was back in the late 60s, early 70s, I believe.
Okay.
And they just kind of exposed these just horrendous situations, and care that was going on for the residents. And I started thinking, okay, well, what if residents, what if their old ghosts came back and wanted revenge for some of these things? So
Right.
that was kind of the impetus for the Dead Pennies. I developed a mythos around, when I was a kid, so many people used to take pennies and go out and put them on a train track or something like that, wait for the train to come by and flatten these pennies out. And I developed this mythos around these pennies they're unfit for circulation. They're the dead pennies now. Well, the staff, that's their nickname for some of the residents in the ward that they were taking care of. These were children who were, in their minds, unfit for circulation.
Wow.
So
I remember back in the day, like I don't know when this stopped, but like pretty much what they did all sort of horrific stuff, but it's like they weren't really trying to care for the people, they're just trying to isolate them from society.
absolutely. Even to the point, I think it was more popular up in the Northeast. And there was I cannot remember the author's name right now, but he wrote a book called The Disappointments Room,
Okay.
and it was children who they may have been physically deformed, they've been mentally challenged for whatever reason. Some people in the Northeast, they built rooms in the house, and that's where they stored their kids because they were ashamed to have them out in
Right.
public instead of getting the proper care that they needed. So yeah, the research on it was some rough stuff to go through, but that's kind of where the kernel of the idea for the new novel came from.
Wait, well, the further you go back in the day, the more that they fucked with people. Like H.P. Lovecraft, his mom used to say, "You're too ugly to leave the house."
Yes, exactly.
So I think she used to lock him in the closet as well. It's like, yeah,
I believe.
yeah. There's all sorts of screwed up stuff. Like, no wonder to keep with monsters and everyone's out to get you. It kind of makes sense.
Right,
But
right.
all right, so right now you're working with Cemetery Dance. Is that has that been your primary source the entire time?
No, this is the first release I've had through Cemetery Dance. Before that, Thunderstorm Books. I think they published. They published probably about 90% of what I've released in limited editions,
Okay.
and they're just always an absolute joy to work with. But the experience with Cemetery Dance and working with Kevin Lucia has just been fantastic. I mean, I've known Kevin for a very long time. He's a very just a stand-up great guy and an incredible author in his own right. He's got a new release that just came out, I believe, a couple weeks ago. And he's just a phenomenal experience from start to finish. Just a great crew of people there.
Yeah, I remember David Wilson. He runs Crossroad Books. He's my publisher, and I was talking to
Yeah,
him, and he was saying he's afraid because he's a writer, and then now he's running the publishing company. He's like afraid people aren't going to remember him as a writer. Uh, but you know, I was like, no, people remember you. Come on my podcast. We'll talk about
and there you go, there you go,
it.
there you go.
But you said you have 17 books out now. Are they all like horror?
They're, I would say, they're primarily all horror. I did take a little dive into, and this, I don't know, this is what the literary field refers to it as. I wrote a book that's considered chick lit, and it's called No Lipstick at Avalon. That really went over very well. I keep getting asked to do a sequel for that, and I'm like, well, I'll get there. I did.
What's that book about?
It's about a young woman who's going through a really terrible divorce, and just kind of finding herself again. She lost center of her life, and she hates her ex really bad, and just kind of re-entering the dating scene a little bit, and struggling to find who she really is again. But it went over extremely well with readers, and for me, if the story is interesting enough, I don't really care what genre it is.
You're right.
Earlier this year, I released my first venture into the straight Western field.
I was gonna say Richard Matheson did like a Western, and
Yeah,
I think he's an awesome writer. But it was like I love his stuff. Like I loved like I Am Legend, Hell House, and Stir of Echoes. They're way better than movies, by the way. But I remember he did like a Western. I was like, well, it's Richard Matheson. I'm sure it's awesome. And it was awesome. So a well-told story is a well-told story. It doesn't quite matter the genre.
Right. Michael Crichton is another one. I mean, he wrote everything from Jurassic Park. He wrote, he was in ER, the series. I mean, he was Westworld. He was across the board, but it had to have that kernel of a really interesting story that engaged him. And earlier this year, I released a book called They Rode Pale Horses, and I'm writing that under Gideon Stone. I kind of had to separate things a little bit to I let people know that I was writing under Gideon Stone, but because it's me,
that's your author for Western name.
Exactly. Because I grew up watching Clint Eastwood and Charles Bronson and all the spaghetti westerns, and they were a blast. They were an absolute blast, and so I decided, you know what, I'm gonna venture into this world. Because it's me. However, I have a dwarf bounty hunter in it called McSweeney, who's one of my favorite characters I've ever written. McSweeney is just a badass character in this. But it was a blast of a time, writing this book. And again, it was just if the story engages me enough, and I know I'm going to have fun with it, then like any other writer, my hope is that the reader will have a blast with it as well.
Did you incorporate some supernatural elements, like a kind of Dark Tower-esque, there's more going on in the world?
Not in this one. I have written a horror Western called Blood Roses. Okay. Now that had some supernatural elements in it for sure. That dealt with a brothel owner, a madam, and two of her girls got abducted. And they kind of help things along in the afterlife with getting revenge, for what happened to them. So, but no, it's just like I say, it's one of those things. If the story's there and if it won't go away out of my head, then I know, you know what, no matter when it's horror, thriller, whatever, I know it's something that I need to kind of dig into.
Hi, this is Dan Henk. Brief intermission from a scheduled podcast. I just wanted to ask people to help support me. I'm trying to give a light and a voice to indie authors and indie artists and indie musicians that don't really get out there. And I like to keep this as ad-free as humanly possible. But in order to do that, I need your support. So it would really help me out if you could support me. As little as $3 a month is a minimum tier. That would be great. So up above is the link. Click on that and you can support me. Thanks, and back to our original program. Have your tastes evolved as an author over time? Like what you prefer to highlight or put out?
Yeah, absolutely. I will always love like Richard Lehman novels, and they, Richard didn't pull any punches. He knew what he was writing. He was writing just a fun, entertaining read. Yeah, was it over the top? Absolutely. If you have sex, guess what? You're probably going to get killed. It's, he had these things, but they were so entertaining to me, years ago. And there's nothing wrong. I still occasionally will pick up, one of his books and read through excerpts and things like that. And they still make me laugh or cringe or whatever, but yeah, my taste has definitely evolved because now I want something deeper. I want something more complex. And it seems like today's readers are really leaning in that direction as well. They want it
Well,
more
it's less of a niche market. Like at one point, it was like the Friday the 13th, like slasher gore. It's got to have that
exactly
one element, and now
right.
people are writing much more complex stuff.
Exactly. And I think it's the same with film. There was a time period in the late 80s, whatever, there were so many slasher films that came out. And yeah, they were entertaining, but audiences today, they want something deeper. They want something more than that. Because after a while, how many heads getting taken off by machetes can you get entertained by?
Well, that's the other thing. If you're the first person to do it, like I remember people kept like knocking on stuff, like like they see Halloween, they're like, "Oh, that's like this movie." That's like it was like actually that was the first one, and all these other movies copied it. But we don't need another copy of Halloween. Halloween broke the
Right.
ground.
Right. Exactly. And I think because audiences have gone through so many of those reiterations of horror, I think it's become a serious challenge to do something that does scare them. And we're seeing a huge uptick in folk horror, and
Yeah,
I think that's one of those things that
I've interviewed a few people that do that like that. So
yeah,
at first I was like, "What is folk horror?" And then they explained it.
right, right, and it's just one of those things. I mean, there's a new movie. I think it just dropped in the last couple of days. Um, then it was evil. I
Okay.
think is the title. But man, I'm seeing that pop up everywhere, and it looks like it's rural country based, folk horror. And I'm like, okay, man, I gotta check this one out. But there's so many writers who do that so well. John Boden, I've written with John, I've collaborated with him. We're on our third book that we're working on together. But John Boden is one. He does folk horror so well. I swear, I don't know. Sometimes John's voice, it feels like he listened to every old outlaw country music singer on 8-track, and somehow that bled into his blood, and he's got that in his system. But when it's done right, it is unnerving and it's very unsettling because I don't think people are used to that yet. They're used to, like you say, the typical tropes of four hikers, go out in the woods to a cabin or something like that. There's so many tropes that have occurred. The designation of folk horror are different, and I think it's just striking a nerve with people and shaking them, which is great to see.
Well, I think whenever anybody comes to something new in the break the boundaries, and people are like, "What the fuck is that?" Like I remember the first time I
Yeah,
saw Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and I was like, "They are so screwed up. What is going on?" But then everybody's copying them. I'm like, "Oh, really? Come on, just
yeah,
stop it. Come up with something new." Like when that came out, it was
exactly,
new,
absolutely. And that when I first saw the original Texas Chainsaw, I thought
which is still
it,
the
it
best one.
oh, hands down, dude.
Yeah.
No, it really, when that movie was over with, I remember feeling chills. I remember the hair up on my arms, and I felt just so unsettled. I felt almost voyeuristic, like I shouldn't have watched what I just saw. It really unnerved me. And at the time, I was like, that's what horror is supposed to do. It is
Yeah.
supposed to unsettle you, And it really, and The Exorcist was the same way. Holy shit. When I first saw that film, talk about, like, I walked away. I wasn't religious growing up, but I remember, man, there was something about that flick. It just scared the hell out of me when I was done. I was like, I feel so unsettled right now. But it's one of those things today I look at, and I know that it's controversial back and forth. You know, some people are 100% for it, some people are against it. Is trigger warning. You know,
What, the Exorcist?
yeah, well, no, just in general, trigger warnings on novels, on films, or whatever. And I'm like, well, you know, I get it that people want these things, but on the other hand, if you're getting a heads up that this contains this, it kind of takes away the impact of things because you're expecting those things now. You know, in the past, man, it's horror. If you pick up a horror novel or you pick up a horror movie or you watch a horror movie, guess what? You should be aware wading into this. There's something in this that is probably going to fuck you up if it's done right. And you know that is the argument back and forth that I have a tough time. I've only written one book that has a trigger warning, and I think I went back and forth on that for a long time. But in the end, I decided
What was
to go
the
ahead
trigger warning? Like, was it just like might be offensive to some, or did you spell out?
Well, the book that I wrote a trigger warning on was a novel of mine called Burner, and it deals with human trafficking, sex trafficking. It has drug references. It has basically every trigger warning that you can imagine happens in this book. And to date, it's been my best-selling book. It still sells tremendously. A reviewer earlier this month she came across it by accident, and she said, "This is the most terrifying book I've ever read."
Yeah.
And I was like, you know what? I'll take it. You know, but the research into that, the case studies that I read, the documentaries I watched, the real life, you know, information for that, I had probably 10 to 15,000 words in the novel that I cut out when I was done, because the crazy thing is those words that I cut were based upon real life case studies.
But you figured it was a little too harsh?
To me, it felt like it was over the top.
Right.
Like people would read that and go, well, that's unbelievable. That the crazy thing is, those are the parts that actually did happen in real life. You know,
yeah, no, I feel like that happens a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but no, Burner was just, it's a hard hitting, psychological, emotional book. But so far, that's the only book I've included a trigger warning on. And again, I go back and forth on it because I think when people wade into picking up a horror novel or watching a horror film, you have to expect that there's something that's supposed to unsettle you or, you know, rattle you. And I think that's what good art does. I mean, I looked at, you know, and by the way, dude, you are no joke as an artist. I looked over your prints. I looked over your tattoo work. You know, I was like, holy shit, like you're no joke, man. You got some skills there. But it's one of those things that art in any form, whether it's the written word or film or photography, tattooing, I think it should provoke you in some way. If it doesn't hit a nerve and make you laugh, make you cry, make you pissed off, make you, you know, unsettled later, then I think it falls flat. It didn't do its job as artists.
No, I agree.
What I think it's supposed to do, you know?
Yeah, no, I agree. And it's kind of proven over time. It's like, it's kind of funny how like all these people that come up with all these conservative limitations don't understand, but it's like every time that you put like a label or, you know, a warning on something, it sells better. Everybody loves it. Like the whole reason why Cop Killer became like a bestseller. It's not that great of a song, but it became a bestseller because you had a what was it? Who was it? That was holding it up, was saying, "Oh, this is horrible. Nobody should buy this." The minute you say that, everyone buys it.
Absolutely. Was that? I might get this wrong. Was that Janet Reno for some reason? I forget who it was, but.
No, she did a lot of other horrible stuff, but with like Waco, with like, you know, like tanks and grenades and whatever.
Remember it was the same thing. 2 Live Crew, as nasty as they want to be.
Oh yeah.
They had to put the sticker over it and banned it, you know, and then it was banned in the USA, you know. And
once it's banned, it sells twice as much.
Yeah. Absolutely. I was in college in Philadelphia, and I was living there when American Psycho when
great
they tried to
novel,
bend
great
that.
novel, yeah.
Absolutely. And I remember, man, it exploded the headlines. This book should be banned. It's, whatever. And I immediately walked down to South Street and bought a copy
Of
right
course,
away.
yeah.
I'm like, and I read it and I was like, holy shit! Like it floored me, blew me away.
Yeah.
I understood why it was making so much, headlines, but at the same time, I'm like, come on,
it's so. I think what a lot of people didn't see at the time is it's very intelligent because it's an analysis of that kind of character and how narcissistic they are. Where people are just like, oh, it's horrible. There's all this violence,
Yep.
You didn't read into it.
No, exactly. And I think like with anything else, that's an evolution. I mean, if we look at there was a cop procedural show, and it had that guy David Caruso on it, the red-haired actor, and his cop partner was kind of a heavyset guy. And I remember there was a scene, and this was on regular broadcast TV. There was a scene where he got up out of bed and showed his bare ass on television. And everyone was like, oh my God, like,
Right.
Holy shit, that happened. Now people don't blink twice at that.
Now you have Game of Thrones with like people walking around half naked. Yeah.
Yeah, and on broadcast TV. And I think it's that evolution. I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing, but we're
I don't think exposing people to anything is a bad thing. Like I'm I'm old, so like there was the first interracial kiss on Star Trek, and then people were freaking out over that, and now nobody cares. But that was great. Like just it breaks the boundaries. It exposes like first it's like, wow, that's really controversial. Now not even because it's already been done.
Exactly. But it does the other side of that is what will be controversial.
Right.
What's next?
Right.
And I don't think anybody's got the answer for that. I think in a lot of ways, artists, I know artists today, writers especially, that they have an idea for a book, but they're scared to actually write it.
Okay.
They're scared to write it because they're afraid of the potential backlash that it could happen later on. And I get that fear, but at the same time, going back to what I said earlier, I think the job of any creator, of any creative, no matter what they're doing, I think they should provoke people with their art. If it polarizes the community and says, we hate it, and then the other half says, we love this, it's the best thing of, okay, then you know what? You've done your job. You've provoked someone. You've created something that is going to last. I think that's what we should be doing.
I always find it weird too, because people like they'll look at your stuff and go, "This is my favorite," and like, really? That's what you picked? But it always surprises me.
Yeah, absolutely. I go through the same thing. It's some reviews you're like, yeah, this didn't really do it for me. And then right on the heels of that, it was a 5-star review. It was like, this absolutely floored me and blew me away. I was like, okay, but the thing is, that's art. That's art. You know how it is.
Yeah, well, I've noticed like going, not to talk about myself, but going back to my novel, like I have like a long section. It's almost like a road scene, and like some people are like, that was my favorite part, like seeing all the landscape on there, and some people are like, oh, you could edit all that out, so like people have different perspectives,
Yeah. I think at the end of the day, as a creator, you do the best you can. You write the story however you feel it needs to be told. People are going to have their opinions after that, whatever that's going to be. But I know that I have a few ideas kicking around that they're not quite ready to be written yet. But at the same time, I know that they're going to be controversial when I finish the projects. And it's just one of those things. I'm like, well, this is the story I'm going to tell. Whatever you want to do with that, okay. Then whatever.
Well, if you get it out now, people will be like, first they'll be offended, and then when a copycat comes along, they'll be like, he was a groundbreaker. He did it before everyone else did it.
Probably. You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right.
Again, going back to albums, like people were flipping out, and then everybody commented, and they're like, "Oh, but NWA was the original," or whatever. So the
Absolutely.
people that at the time, everybody was crying about how horrible they were. Not only did they sell, million something copies,
Sure.
but but all right. So, do you have a favorite thing that you like to work on? Just like a favorite topic, a favorite, some
Sure.
people is like with me is cosmic horror. I love doing cosmic horror.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
but some people they prefer to do like horror westerns or folk horror or
Right. Right.
whatever. So, what do you feel like grabs you the most?
The type of storyline that I've always been attracted to is the underbelly of society.
Okay.
I love writing about, people that are overlooked often. I want to hear about what happens when the bartender gets off work. I want to hear about, something that the guy in the back of a garbage truck he found that he took home at night and he's not telling anybody about it. I want to hear about those people, in society. I want to hear their story. So I often write
The
about
weird, strange twists and yeah.
absolutely, absolutely. I have a novella collection of mine, Inner Demons, that kind of digs into that, pretty heavily. And it's the criminal undercurrent that I like kind of, and I know where that came from. It came from my time living in Philadelphia, no doubt about it. Just being around the city, and it's so many interesting
When did you
characters.
live in Philly?
I lived on 21st and Walnut, and I lived there around 90 to 92.
Okay.
So yeah, I was right in the thick of things. And
Yeah, I lived
before
in Philly,
that,
but much later. I lived in
yeah,
2014. Yeah.
okay, all right. But
But
I grew up.
around 90 92, I lived in DC, and DC was horrible. I have that's it, the inspiration for quite a number of my stories. So it's like, I remember how horrible that was. Yeah.
No doubt. Absolutely, no doubt. I grew up I guess it was a little bit farther than that from DC, but I grew up in Maryland until I was about 9, and then moved just over the line into Pennsylvania, and I
Okay.
was there until I went to college. But yeah, I mean, I was around cornfields and dogs howling at night. So when I got to Philly, I was like, holy shit, what have I jumped into here? Um, but how I mean, you're exposed to that if you were in DC, and you're in New York now, I believe, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
And I was
So
in DC during the Marion Barry years, like the when he was
oh
caught,
man.
on tape
Mm,
smoking crack with the
yeah.
prostitute. Yeah. Like
Oh,
I remember they right as I left, I moved to New York in 98. Right as I left, they busted 12 cops who were, they're cracking down on coke dealers in that whole warehouse where they're storing it and reselling it.
doesn't that sounds like a Marvel comic or a DC comic or something. That doesn't sound like it would, but it
I forget
happened
who it
over and
is, but he
over.
said reality is weirder than fiction. It's true.
It 100% is 100%. But walking around the city, I mean, you can't help but people watch and think, about characters. It's impossible,
Right.
to be exposed around that. And I've always usually got some kind of documentary on in the background while I'm making notes or developing something like that. And the
Well,
one that
the
comes to
really
mind.
good fictional tales are in a way kind of a documentary, like Taxi
Yeah,
Driver.
absolutely, absolutely. Well, and actually, getting back to your original question, the stories that I'm drawn to are more real life. I could read about this on the news tonight with a slight twist on the dial,
Right.
slight twist of weird in there, because I still think, and I'm not the first person to say this. Anything that we create, whether it's monsters or whatever, it'll never compare to the horrors that humans can do to one another. It's impossible. Um, but no, I recall watching a documentary called The Cocaine Cowboys, and it
Okay.
was
Yeah. Yeah. I
about
know what you're talking about. Yeah.
that one, yeah, the
Yeah.
drug smuggling coming into
Yeah.
Florida, and I remember one of the smugglers was saying, Florida actually built new banks because of the amount of money coming into the territory. I think it was Miami probably, but it just floored me. And so,
I'm totally
yeah,
not surprised. Yeah.
no, not at all. But I mean, it quickly reached the point where guys were pulling out Mac 10s in the middle of the street and having absolute shootouts in the middle of the
Which,
mall.
by the way, is a horrible gun. The Mac 10 is a horrible gun. Not like damage wise, but just it's not made well. But
It's a cheap, bad gun.
yeah.
I've heard the same thing actually.
No, my dad has an FML. He's like a gun collector.
Yeah.
But he's like those things are horrible. Like Tech 9s and Mac 10s are horrible.
I couldn't believe that. But no, that kind of tale is always what intrigues me. And and as a writer, as an artist, even what it's like. It's like it always starts with something and it ends with what if? What
Right.
if this happened?
Right.
So
Well, the best people, and we brought this up previously, like the best people, they can turn anything into something really interesting. Like I'm a big fan of Neil Gaiman, and Neil Gaiman, I mean, he could talk about a piece of thread and it would be, interesting and amazing. Whereas you could have somebody that has like the best story in the world, but they don't know how to visualize it for the character.
absolutely. I 100% agree with that. And Gaiman that guy is in a class on his own.
Right.
I mean, he truly is. That's another one, a documentary I watched on the last signing tour that he did.
Okay.
And I was absolutely floored at watching him. At the end of the day, he would stay at the signings until the last fan. He took care of the last fan. It didn't matter how long it went on.
Yeah, no,
And
I met him like back in '91 when he like
did you
looked
really?
he was doing Sandman, and I wanted to be a comic artist, so I wanted to bring my
Yeah.
storyboards.
Right.
He was very nice. I mean, he probably was nice too because I was like, a fan, whatever, But I was like, yeah, I'm gonna be hired. I'm on my way, But he looked very like punk rock. Yeah, like he looked like the
Oh yeah.
Ramones, like leather jacket,
Absolutely.
But I think he's one of those guys. He's only gotten better over time. Like when he's doing the Sandman, some of it was amazing. Some of it you're like, all right. None of it was bad, but now he's gotten to the point where his writing is so smooth and so eloquent. I'm jealous.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he's another one. He's got such an incredibly unique voice, but seeing him at his signings, at the end of the day, he had signed so much that he iced his elbow. There was a bucket of ice water waiting for him at the end of every day. And I was like, you know what? I love that he's showing so much love back to the fans by doing like it sucks that he had to ice his elbow, but I love that's his outlook.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Yeah. So right now, like you probably don't like have to ice your elbow from signing books all the time. But right now, what you're working on mainly like novels or short stories? Are you working on any screenplays? What do you have going on?
Sure. I've definitely explored screenplay writing. Years ago, HBO had a competition called Project Greenlight, and it was headed up by Matt Damon and Ben Affleck at the time, early on. And I had never explored writing a screenplay before, but I had this idea and I kept kicking it around. And I found out about this competition. I had a month of time for the deadline. And I'm like, you know what? Okay, cool. I'm doing this. And at the time I was running my own ad agency and I was working just a ridiculous amount of hours. So every night about 10 o'clock, I would shut off the client work that I was dealing with during the day, and I would work on this screenplay. So I got the final screenplay. I got it done in about 26 days. And I was like, all right, I waited 2 days, read back through it so I could get a fresh eye and see if I had to tweak something. Yeah, and I changed some things, submitted it in, and I think they got something like 4,800 submissions, and I made it down to the top 500.
Oh, nice.
And that was like every week I was getting those emails going, congratulations, you've advanced to the next round. And man, after
The
the third or
confidence
fourth,
booster, yeah.
it was a confidence boost, but I'll tell you, after the third or fourth week, that made my heart beat faster, getting that hit. So, but no, I explored that with a couple other screenplays. I've gotten close to production a couple times, but my late friend JF Gonzalez, he once told me, until you see it on the DVD cover, until you see the movie poster or it's
Right.
in the theater, do not ever believe that this is going to happen.
Right.
Just continue working forward. Don't believe it's ever going to happen. I was like, you know what? I don't even view that as pessimistic. I'm like, that's realistic to me. Okay,
That is realistic. I know so many people that they got optioned and like some of them even got very far, but they didn't get picked up.
Yep, exactly.
That's the way it happens. Yeah.
Exactly. So, but I did, over the past 6 months, I did convert my novel Burner into script format. And I'm actually almost finalizing a screenplay Bible to include to that. So it's time I dipped my feet back into those waters a little bit. But primarily I'm working on novels right now. When I finish a big project, I do throw out a short story or two in between. And I kind of view that as a palate cleanser to kind of get rid of, the luggage that I carried around developing the novel. And no, I've got a couple things that I'm working on, collaborating with people right now. The closest one that I'm almost done with is the new one with John Boden. That'll be the third in what we've been calling the Knuckle Bucket Thang series. And working with John is just a blast. I mean, I adore the guy, and it's just I never know what to expect when I get a new chapter from him. That fucker has painted me into a corner 3 chapters in a row sometimes, and I just laugh at it. I'm like, man, I am going to get you when I see you.
You got to figure out a way to get out of that.
Yeah. That old trope with ending a chapter with there was she drew a gun. There was a knock at the door. He did that 3 chapters in a row. Like, John. But no, it's a blast. So I think we've got maybe 5,000 words left in that. And it was originally going to be a novella, like the other 2 books that we've written. But I think right now it's floating around 56, 57,000 words. So it decided to be a lot longer than what we expected. But man, this thing is off the rails. I mean,
what would you consider a short story versus novella versus a full novel?
Sure. Typically for my own range, I like the sweet spot for short stories for me is around 5,000 or less. That's around 3 to 5,000 for me. That for me is a good length for a short story. We bump up to novelettes, which are 10 to 12,000 words, and then I would say 15 to 35 is a novella. You could press it a little bit farther. Right now, I think from most publishers are looking at a novel is around 75,000 words minimum. So you can have a longer novella, I guess, and push the boundaries on it. But as long as it's well developed, I think it fits the bill.
Yeah, I remember I did like a compilation anthology, and I remember I talked to Christine Morgan about it, and I was like, she's like, what are you looking for? And I said, well, like I'm not rich, so how about I trade you one of the drawings I did for one of your stories in exchange for a short story. She's like, okay. And a bunch of people were down, like Jeff Sayer was down, a bunch of people. Robert, who else? Like a bunch of Patrick C. Harrison, all these people were down.
Patrick,
So, so she goes, what are you looking for? I was like, I'm thinking like 30,000 words. She goes, I hope that's a mistake. I was like, oh, is it? It's like, so like the format for short stories is usually about 3 to 5,000 words.
Yeah.
And like I was like, okay, let me adjust this. But yeah, no, she entered. It was a great entry. I told her like I did an edit of everybody's stuff. There were a couple people that were like so tightly edited that I do very little. Like Chrissy Morgan was like that. Jeff Strands was like that. Ryan C. Thomas was like that. You know,
Right.
there were a few people who were just like, you know, I don't even really have to touch it.
Well, both, and I adore Christine. She writes some of the most fucked up shit that I've ever read, but I love her to death. You know, but her and Jeff, you know, as well, they've been doing this a while. So yeah, when they're ready to submit something, I can imagine it is pretty finely tuned. That, you know, that there's not a lot left to deal with when it gets into a publisher's hands. But now they're fantastic writers. I love those guys to death.
Yeah, very cleaned up. Yeah, I my first three books I put out through publishers, and pretty much like I would, you know, write a script and then send to them, you know, and like they would like do the extensive edit and everything, and then I got my rights back, you know, to my first novel, and so I edited a bit and I put it out, you know, and then people were like, oh, there are all these mistakes. I was like, what? It's like it's a learning process, but you know, I was like, oh wait, I don't have a publisher to catch all those edits, so
Right,
you know,
right. Right. And well, and you know, it's definitely been a challenge or a change rather in the publishing field. You know, 10 years ago, if you self-published something, man, you were looked upon like a leper. I mean, like,
right,
oh,
yeah,
you weren't
yeah.
good enough. You weren't good enough to get traditionally published. You know,
Just
but
said that with the ebooks too, yeah.
yeah, no, 100%, you know, but now it's like if somebody self-publishes and goes through the process, if they go through the process of getting someone to edit it and they develop, you know, whether they do it themselves or hire a designer to do a really nice looking cover, you know, no one cares. You know, I read, you know, through email blasts and various things, self-publishing, you know, authors that have really exploded because they paid attention, they've gone through the process, you know. But the challenge on Amazon is because they have made it so easy, how do you set yourself apart? You know, because every day there is just a boatload of new titles that are being published. So it's the competition, I think, is so much more than it used to be years ago. And
I
that's
guess
always
you
been
got
a
to find
struggle.
some way to like get yourself out. Like Jeff Strand did
Yeah,
rerun of Technical Tomatoes, he does
yeah,
TikTok, you know, videos where it's like getting pelted by tomatoes along the book. It's like,
exactly. Exactly. You know, exactly. And social media is another thing. You know, it's what has become really aggravating to me is if I am promoting an event, I need to promote it on so many platforms right now. And if I'm doing it like a book signing and I'm with a group of other writers, their names might not be the same on those platforms. So
oh
I need to go
yeah,
one by one by one by one and figure out who the
find
hell I'm adding.
them to like tag
Yeah,
them or whatever. Yeah,
yeah, yeah. So that's become just a nightmare to do anything like that. And it's, you know, but publishers are relying more on the authors to market
oh
their own
yeah,
work.
yeah, definitely, yeah.
You know, some of them even ask, you know, ahead of time, what are you going to do to market, you know, your work that comes out? And I think, I mean, today it's a fair question, but that's something most authors, they never had to worry about that in the past, you
Right.
know.
Well,
So
I remember I was like reading Stephen King's on writing thing, and he's talking
yeah,
about like when he was initially the first what was the first book they picked up?
Carrie was his first.
Carrie was first, yeah.
Yeah.
But he said like they called him up and they said, you know, yeah, we're writing you a check for $250,000. He's like, what? Can you repeat that? You know, which I'm sure
Yeah.
was, you know, especially back then was an amazing amount of money, you know.
Yeah.
But it's like he probably the script sent to the publisher and they took care of everything, the
Yeah.
marketing, the
Oh
editing,
yeah.
everything. Yeah.
Yeah. I think at the time, I think he might have been making 20 grand as a teacher, but
Yeah.
it was something so low.
He
And
was an education teacher, yeah.
yeah, and I think when he got that news, I think he said
Or
he sort
not
of
education, English. Every teacher's an education teacher, but I think he was an English teacher, yeah.
yeah, but I think I remember reading that, and I think he said he sort of slid down the wall, you know,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know,
yeah.
thinking about this, you know. But yeah, and he trashed it. He trashed that novel. I mean, Tabitha dug it out of the trash can, you know,
Yeah,
from what I
no,
remember
yeah, he
reading.
said that. He said he wrote it, he threw it away, and his wife like dug it out. She was like, no, you really need to publish this.
Yeah.
You know,
So
but
crazy.
I mean, like I said, like people always think your best thing is like not what you'd imagined was your best thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And you just never know what's going to hit a nerve, with
Right.
people. And, and that's why I think, people say it all the time, don't write for the market, write what intrigues and inspires you. And I think that's some solid advice, whatever story engages you and you're like, yeah, I really have to freaking write this story. All right, stick with that.
Well, not
Whatever
to
else
mention,
happens,
if
all
you
right.
write for the market, by the time it comes out, the market's somewhere else.
Yeah, it's gone. It's already changed, you know.
And the people who really
So
make a difference do something original and new. And at first, it's hard to get it across, but once it gets across, it blows up.
absolutely, absolutely. And I keep wondering, for a while, vampires were just huge in
Right.
fiction and in film. And then it shifted, zombies returned, and
Yeah.
now they've exploded. Now it seems like they're fading down a little bit. So it's like, all right, what's next? What's
But
what
I
what's
think you
what's
need
next?
the talent right. Like Anne Rice did such a great job with
Yeah.
vampires, and people are like, "Well, vampires have been around forever, but this is new and different." And then
Right.
everybody copied her, or
Exactly.
George Romero did, Night of the Living Dead and Dawn of the Dead, and people were like,
Mhm.
"This is such a great take." And then you
Yeah.
had all these crappy movies like Shockwaves and Zombie Lake, and yeah,
Right.
which I've seen all of them, but they're horrible.
Yep. There's a new one that just came out called Herd,
Okay.
Herd, and the trailer looks good. I haven't watched the flick yet, but the zombies in that, it looks like they have weird growths on their face.
Oh, have
They
you
look
seen
a
The Last
little
of
alien.
Us? Have you seen that show, The Last of Us?
I thought it was great. I thought it
Yeah,
was
I
great.
loved it. Yeah.
I
And
played the video game too.
and here's an aside, a real quick aside. It's like, so I was tattooing a guy. He's a very you know, super Trumpian patriotic. Like he got a Grim Reaper, but the Grim Reaper's cape is like an American flag, and he's holding a 50 caliber gun. So and I have a TV, so I play shows while I tattoo people. I was like, oh, check this out, I like this. So he's watching The Last of Us, and we got to like I think the fourth episode where it's like the gay couple, and like right away he's like, ah, come on, and I'm like, dude, it's a good story. It makes sense. They're not
Just
pushing any
relax.
social shit. Just relax. By the end of
No,
it, he's like, I think I'm gonna cry. That's a good
that was
story. Yeah.
that was an emotional end to that sort of side story. But
But
no,
I'm
I
saying that's a good story. Like that's the impact of a good story. You didn't feel like any agenda was being pushed in. You're just like,
no,
I got wrapped up in the story.
yeah, it was just the characters and their story, and that was enough to draw you in.
Right.
And that was, but The Last of Us, I at the time when that video game came out, my son was really into gaming. I hadn't touched, other than kind of screwing around and with Mortal Kombat with him and playing games off and on. I didn't really, I couldn't get the damn joysticks to work. I don't know what the hell I was doing. So The Last of Us came out, and I'm like, I gotta give this
Do
a
they even
whirl.
have joysticks anymore? Like they probably did
No,
when I was a kid, but
it's the controller, like the PlayStation
yeah,
controllers or
yeah,
whatever. But there was too many damn buttons. I'm like, I don't know what the hell I was doing. So, but The Last of Us came out, and I'm like, I gotta explore this. I gotta see what's out, dude. When I was finished that, I felt like I had just watched the most amazing 30-hour movie of my entire life. I could not believe the sort of details on the storyline that they included into that game. It was, there's a section where Ellie is in the back of a pickup and she stole a dirty magazine, and she's in the back flipping through, and she's like, well, I can see why, people people check this out for the pictures or whatever. And Joel looks around and he's like, what the hell, you shouldn't be looking at that, whatever. That had nothing to do with anything else at all. All
but
it
it's like
was
that
was
little element of realism. Yeah.
absolutely, and it just absolutely floored me. Absolutely floored me. You know,
Well,
but
I
the
know now
series
they
is better.
hire people just to write the script for video games, or like a
Absolutely.
number of people are gonna hold me just to do artwork for a video game they're doing. Like, I'm like, that's not my thing. Like,
Right.
but it's cool that you're getting to real illustrators to do it.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. 100%. And can you imagine that, Dan? Can you imagine being the story development guy? Like, what a blast. Are you kidding me? That would be a ton of fun. You know?
Right. Well,
Yeah.
back in the day, that happened a lot with comic books, and the people didn't get credited went to the company. But that's a different story entirely. like I've interviewed some of the legends that like inspired me, and they're teachers at art colleges because they got ripped off. But I think people are getting like a little bit more aware of like they got to watch out for themselves. They can't just put out the best product. They also have to watch their rights.
Absolutely, absolutely, and plus with the strike going on, with the creatives, the writers, and everything. I mean, yeah, they are finally standing up. The fact that that we still consider as writers a pro sale, 3 to 5 cents. That hasn't changed since Edgar Allan Poe's times. Like, come on, like how So that's one of
You
the main
died in
reasons.
gutter, by the way. But go ahead.
Yeah, yes. But that's one of those things that I look at today. And I do short stories, for anthologies or publications like that. But those are the palate cleansers. Those are icing on the cake for me. It's
Right.
the novels and novellas. That's where the money is truly generated, and out of necessity, to be honest. So, but yeah, no, it's about time that writers get some kickback on some things.
Right. Yeah, well, everyone seems to be getting kickback. It's I definitely agree it's time for the writers too, but like the musicians are getting more now. Like
Yeah,
artists when they do stuff are getting more now. Like comic book
absolutely.
writers and stuff. So yeah, I agree with that. All right, man. So do you have anything else that you want to mention? Like in the links, anything you have coming out that people should check out?
No, not really. I mean, on my website itself is at robertfordauthor.com.
Okay.
And you can check out news there. I am developing a Substack as well. I hear that's what all the cool kids are doing, so I got to transfer over to that as well. But I would say just keep an eye out for the next book from John Boden and I. That'll be popping up in the near future.
Okay. And what's the name of that?
The title for that is going to be called Black Salve.
Okay. Are you gonna alter it or that's the working title?
I think that might be the final title. I
Okay.
think
Great.
so. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
awesome, man. Well, great to have you on the show. Do you have anything else you want to mention? Anything else you want to throw out there?
No, just I really appreciate you having me on. It's been a blast talking with you, and like I say, anybody who is interested in a good creepy ass read, go check out The Dead Pennies by Cemetery Dance Publications.
Okay, awesome. All right, man. Thank you. We'll wrap it up with that.